Markus Maicher, a director who's presenting 2 films to this year's edition of the festival. And he was here, he was at the festival last year as well with another film. So we are glad to have him for the second time for a second interview to keep exploring his artistic research. The films he's presenting this year are called Into the Wild and 10 Megabytes of Memory. And so let's start maybe with the first one. Is a film made through with a hand cranked bolex, as you wrote, and you describe it as a glimpse through the cracks. Somebody's walking in the meadow, trees trembling in the wind, flower, grass, a world that only film can see. The material flow emerging from the coupling of camera, celluloid, silver salts, chemicals, light particles, and the hand of the filmmaker. So it was a very fascinating film for me to watch. And we decided to put it in this section called Dreams, because really it appeared to me as watching images from a dream. So my first question is, how did the idea for this film come to you? And I was curious to know whether when you filmed, you had already a clear idea of the film you wanted to make, or if it was something that took shape along the process.
Yeah, so basically I had no idea about what I was going to do, but this has to do with the context in which the film emerged, and maybe I have to tell something about that, because I feel it's important to understanding the film. There's this place called Film Farm by Phil Hoffman. It's a Canadian filmmaker who is doing this independent imaging retreat every year at a farm in Canada. It's like it's 2 or 3 hours from Toronto. It's somewhere in the countryside, and it's basically his old farm, which he converted into a little cinema, and also into dark rooms where you can develop film. And he's been hosting those workshops for the last, I think, more than 20 years. And the idea is that you get 5 or 6 rolls of film, black and white film, and you have a week and you can just explore whatever you want to. Mostly it's the environment there, because you are at the farm for a whole week. And you basically, for instance, the film stock, it's a black and white sound stock. So it's a very cheap film stock that is used to record sound and not images. So what you get is very, very contrasty images, because of the specificities of how the sound stock works. And the Bolex we used, it doesn't have any electricity, so you can hand crank it. I mean, it does have a motor, but you sort of crank the motor and then you can shoot. And with the Bolex, you have a lot of possibilities how to manipulate the images, or to control actually what you're doing. You can do single frames. You can wind the film backwards in the camera. You can do multiple exposures. And so my intention was to experiment as much as possible, and to sort of relate to this environment that was there in front of me, and things that maybe, I mean, maybe you do not find very interesting in your ordinary life, which is sort of the nature around you: trees, grass, a barn door, things that, you know, doesn't really sparkle your interest. But with a camera in the hand and by looking through the viewfinder, all of a sudden things become interesting, and sort of you want to capture them on film, and more than just capturing them, I was interested in transforming what I was seeing into another filmic experience. And also an important part was that we were doing everything ourselves and doing everything by hand, basically. Loading the camera ourselves, shooting, of course, but then also developing the film by hand. So we were, Phil, he put the dark rooms in the old stables where the pig stables were once. So it was those like wet underground basement rooms where we had huge buckets with the chemistry inside. And so we weren't even using Lomo tanks, which is what you usually do when you develop yourself in the darkroom. You spool your film into a Lomo tank. But here we just threw the film into a huge bucket and sort of stirred in the bucket. So it was a very, very DIY process. And yeah, I feel like that's also important to understand how the film in the end emerged and how it looks like. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That's very interesting to know the process behind, and it sounds really very fascinating, the process and the place also that you describe. And yeah, I would like to reconnect with what you said related to the fact that once you have a camera in your hand, you start to see something else in the reality that maybe you are not so attracted to when you watch it just with the eyes. So, and I find this theme also in the description that you make of your film, because you say that it's a world that only film can see. And actually, for what I know of your films so far, I feel that this is something that is present in many of your works. Actually, I mean, in this case, probably is more related to the medium of film that you use, but also your use of the editing that I saw in other of your films is really, I feel, is related to this theme. So it seems it suggests the possibility of entering a reality that exists just in films. And I wanted to ask you if it's correct what I feel, and also how important is for you this theme in your artworks.
Yeah, definitely. It's something I'm exploring and something I'm interested in. How the medium film works, or maybe to frame it better, how, like, what you can do with the medium of film, and how you can transform sort of the aesthetic experience of the world with film. And I think one reason why I'm attracted to analog film, because most of my films, except the other one, which we'll discuss later, they were shot on either Super 8 or 60mm film. And part of the reason why I'm attracted to analog film is it's the possibility of working with not just images, but the material. So I feel like analog film is not just a medium where you can record images with it, but it's a medium that you can touch it, and actually you have to touch it if you want to develop it yourself. You can scratch on it, you can use different processes to develop it. You then basically you project it by hand. So it's a very manual process. It's a very bodily process. It's very transformative also in the sense that it transforms you as a person, I feel like, because working with it's very difficult. I mean, film, it's sort of it always works against you. It resists, it like, it doesn't want to do what you want to do. But in the end, this also leads to a result that you cannot really control. And I really like this aspect of it, that it's not that you have perfect control over the outcome, and sort of the film is a perfect representation of your subjective vision of what you wanted to do. But it's sort of a mix of the film material itself, of the chemistry, of the world around you, and of what of course of your ideas as well, but they are never, perfectly expressed, and sort of your ideas transform also while working with the material. And if you see what's coming back on the material, sort of it also transforms how you work with film. And also, when I was working on this film, a lot of things happened. Basically, the whole film is a chronicle of failure, because I think the first day I was shooting the whole day on one roll of film and did a lot of multiple exposures and sort of complicated experiments. And then this roll of film, it disappeared. I couldn't find it anymore. And then another day, I shot the whole day with the Bolex with the shutter closed, because there's a little lever, and if that lever is closed and you don't remember that you closed it the day before, basically you're not recording any images. And then another day, I wanted to project my images on the projector, and it scratched all of them. And I remember I was really frustrated. And then Phil, he said something really that really influenced my thinking about film. He said, well, film scratches just like we scratch in life, and we have to accept it as a fact, and we just have to move on. And that it was such a nice way to see not just film but also life. I mean, you can't do anything about it. It wears and tears, it scratches. In the end, it vanishes, and there's no point in fighting against it. So you have to accept also film as a medium that destroys itself by projecting it. And so yes, that's one very important aspect, and the other is to explore the filmic medium itself, or let's say the dispositif of film, with everything that belongs to it: film itself, the projector, cinema. And I'm very interested in how film is made up of single frames. So in my last film that I showed last year, Mountain View, you also have a single frames, sort of alternating, and so this is something I feel like it's interesting how the appearance of, or the illusion of, continuous movement is created by film. Of course, this is not something new, and people have investigated for a long time, but it's something that tickles my interest somehow, to look at this, to look at how the medium works. Especially, I think one of the reasons why it's becoming more and more interesting again is the relation of the analog medium to the digital format. And people are starting to investigate again, okay, what is the specific, what are the specificities of analog film compared to the digital medium? And that's something I'm interested in, and I'm also doing a PhD on it. So yeah.
Great. And you mean in the analog films, you can see more clearly that it's a sequence of images.
So I would say in the experience of watching the film, of course you cannot, usually, because this is something that is hidden. As is the projector, usually it's hidden behind a glass screen. But if you're, for instance, I'm working as a projectionist, so I always have the sort of the behind the scenes view. I see the film strip, I see the projector working, and with analog film, you can see it on the film strip. So you can physically see how film is made up of single images. You can see in the projector how movement is created by intermittent motion. And I feel like with the digital medium, it's even more hidden than it is in the cinema with analog film. And not only that, I mean, even though a DCP is also made of single images, what we usually see on the screen are video streams, and they are not really made of single images anymore, but those are video streams. So they are basically, I mean, interpolations and not really single images, at least not as it is stored in the file. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It's true that having this physical relationship with with that physical support makes you really experience the fact that they are single images. And yeah, I also wanted to thank you for sharing your behind the scene process of your film, and sharing also the aspect of the frustration and the difficulty, because I feel this is something that maybe of course viewers of film never know, because they just see the final result of something. But it's true that every filmmaker somehow live, when he's making a film, live a process, and in this process there are always things that don't work, or things that make you change the path. And this is also, I think, what's interesting in the end of in the experience of making a film. It's really an experience. So sharing this is interesting, and probably also for other filmmakers who are listening to this interview now. And yeah, now I would like to go to the other film that you made, because it's somehow is also related with this discourse of single images. And yeah, this film is called 10 Megabytes of Memory. And you start in the description of this film, you start with the question, what is the meaning of memory in the digital age? For humans, memory consists of subjective images of past events. For computers, memory refers to an objective capacity to store information. So this is the base from which the film starts. And it's a sort of conceptual film also, I would say, because it really reflects on what is memory, and is it possible to weight it in terms really of weight of a file or weight of a physical material. So yeah, also in this case, I would like to ask you, how did you have the idea for this film? How was it born, this film?
So the idea for this film also was sort of born in relation to a workshop by Laura Marx. She initiated the Small File Media Format Festival, which is it's a really nice festival where the idea is that basically you work with very small files. I think the limitation is like 5 megabytes, and they made an exception for my 10 megabyte film. And so the logic behind it is that we're living in an age where more and more images are created and watched and streamed, and those images they tend to have higher and higher resolutions, higher and higher bit rates, and therefore they're using more and more resources. So I think the whole streaming industry, it's making up 1% of all the greenhouse gases emitted, which is, I don't know if it's entirely true, but I think it's somewhere around that. And I think I mean, that's a crazy amount. So Laura Marx's idea is to sort of make a festival where you explore the possibilities to create films that do not follow this logic, and that try to sort of have an aesthetics, a small file aesthetics, or compression aesthetics, as they call it, and try to work with limitations that then create something new. And also to show that you can create something beautiful without having to go bigger and bigger and higher bitrate and so on and so on. So this was the sort of the origin. And then and then on the other hand, I had this personal archive of video aid footage that my father recorded 30 years ago when I was a little kid. or 35 years ago, and I had a very uncanny feeling when I watched this footage, because in a way, what you see is not your memory. First of all, most of the things you don't remember, and maybe those you remember, they don't relate to images that you see on the screen at all. You feel like you see another person, you don't see yourself, and it's very, I don't know, for me it's very uncanny, much more than with pictures, still images. So then I wanted to work with this relation between memory as something very subjective, and on the other hand, memory, which is the storage capacity of the computer, and how much memory can you put in 10 megabytes, or how can you put all this memory of 10 years of recordings into sort of a small file of 10 megabytes. So this relation sort of was interesting. And then I started to play around with compression algorithms and how to work with this huge amount of footage. And then I started to, what I did was edit the film only in a command line. There's this neat little program, FFmpeg, which runs behind a lot of programs like VLC Media Player. I think it also runs behind most streaming platforms. It's sort of an open source program that you can use in the command line. So you just type the commands and it transforms your video, and you have infinite possibilities and control over what you want to do. And with this program and in the command line, I sort of investigated compression and how to manipulate the films in order to make sort of a 10 megabyte file. And what I realized was that in a way this was very similar to working with analog film, because what I was just saying before, to work with the material of film itself, also sort of I could also relate to that in working with FFmpeg and the digital file, because I started to manipulate not just the images that I saw in a sort of a editing program where I see the images and I can edit them, but I manipulated the file itself. So I thought it's also like working with the material of the file, with the materiality, the really the bits, and manipulating them. And yeah, so for me, this relates very much to working also with analog film. And yeah, so much for that.
Yeah, no. I totally see the connection, and I also feel that this is clear also from the title that you chose for the film, because talking about weight of something is something that really relates to physicality of the thing. So it's like the file becomes something really physical. And one detail that I noticed in this film is the fact that you also decided to keep the moments of videotape noise. So not just the images, the ones that we consider the good part, like usually the videotape noise is something that is just a mistake that you cut out when you want to edit something. In this case, is really part of the stream that you see. And of course, this is something related probably to the fact that this was part of the file. So you just put the file inside the program and it came out. But for me, it was also then creating a meaning when I see the film. So I wanted to ask you why did you decide to keep it, and what does it represent for you, these moments of videotape noise?
Yeah, I wanted to keep the tapes as they were, so I didn't want to edit them, because I thought, I mean, in a way, this is how they are, and those sort of where there's no footage on it and it's just gray noise. In a way, it's just an empty videotape where nothing was recorded. And in some parts, there's quite long stretches of where there's nothing recorded. So yeah, I mean, in a way, it's sort of the maybe it's a lapse in memory, or it's something, or it sort of, I was thinking what happened in those moments where nothing was recorded. In a way, they don't exist anymore, maybe, at least not objectively, as an image recorded on a tape. So yeah, I was thinking those are the empty spots in memory, on the tape, and also maybe in my memory. So yeah, so I definitely wanted to keep them and have them as a sort of a material representation, or a material, it's not even a representation, it's sort of a material trace of what was actually on the tapes, and sort of also material representation of time also, in a way, because it's also time that's elapsing in those moments, and usually in editing, I mean, with all the films, mainstream Hollywood films, let's say, there's something like continuity editing, and of course it's edited in a way that we don't see, or we don't feel that spaces and time are sort of stitched together. It all feels very natural to us. And of course, one of the criticisms of materialistic films are that those sort of erase those traces of time from the films, and sort of a fetishizing something. And materialistic film practices, they keep they keep this trace, and they don't try to erase this out. And yeah, this was something I felt was important to keep in the film and work with.
Yeah, I definitely felt the same when I watched the film. And yeah, I also, it made me reflect also about, yeah, the fact that when there is an emptiness, in general in film, you start much more with your imagination, and maybe you construct something else. So leaving the emptiness, or the void somehow, is maybe that is maybe the most interesting moments, almost like when the viewer can build something on the image. So those moments for me were really those moments where you got reminded that what you are watching is just images of a reality, and there is another whole world behind. Without those moments, probably you could maybe forget it more easily. So I think they were really important. And yeah, my last question is just if you are working on something new at the moment, how is your art practice going on, and where is it going at the moment?
That's a most difficult question of them all. So yeah, one of the ideas was to, or one thing I already did, which maybe I'll be maybe I will sort of put out there, is to compress this file even more. Which so while I was editing it and compressing it, I made a mistake, and I instead of 700 kilobits, I entered 700 bits as a bit rate into the program, and what I got was a completely abstracted image. So you can't see anything on it anymore except sort of patterns, shapes, colors. So I thought this was also interesting to go even further and compress it even further and see how it transforms into something else, into something even more abstract. And then my sort of what I'm interested in right now is more and more this relation between the human and the computer, or also analog film and digital film. And I'm trying to work on this relation, and on how maybe it's not so simple that first there was the analog and then it got replaced by the digital, and now we don't need analog film anymore because everything is digital or is becoming digital. But to look at the fact that the digital, first of all, is much older than analog film, because it's just something that digital, in a sense, or in the meaning of the word, is something that you can count, something that is discrete. And yeah, the idea is to look at it from a sort of a media archaeological perspective and see how maybe the digital was always there and how the analog is not disappearing in the digital world. And because in the end, you also need a sort of a perception of digital images, and this perception is also always analog because it's a human perception. And yeah, this relation I'm trying to work on a little bit more and create more films and maybe also installations out of this interesting thing, sort of interesting hybrid environment we're living in.
Yeah. It sounds interesting, and I mean, we are all very curious to watch other of your films in the future. You're always welcome to send your films to us, and yeah, to keep following this research. Yeah, for today, I guess I'm finished with my questions. It was very nice to have you here again and to listen to you. And you are welcome, as I said, to all the other filmmakers as well. Of course, you are welcome physically once we will have another physical event in Sweden. And for the moment, I thank you very much for giving us your time this morning. And I recommend to everyone who is watching this interview and still hasn't watched Markus films to go and watch them, because they are available at the festival online until next Sunday, 24th. So they are really worth watching. Thank you very much, Markus.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and thanks for putting so much effort into the festival and giving a platform for people to show their works. It's really great.
Thank you. Have a nice day. Ciao.
Bye.